In this episode, we're going to be talking about, do you need upfront capital to launch a podcast? When investing in your podcast, what should you do first? And how to build a community with a podcast that grows your business. Stay tuned. This is the Podcast in the Rough. Tune in every Friday for new adventurous episodes. Welcome to the Podcast in the Rough. This is episode 116. I'm your host, Zebulon Thomas, and today I wanted to put together a really compact podcast episode to give you exactly what you need to launch your podcast, know when to invest, and also how to build a community using your podcast that serves your business. So let's dive right into this. So many of you have asked me the question of, what should I buy? Or I have the equipment, but I don't know how to use this thing to grow my business. What's the first thing I need to do? Or I've started my podcast. It's time for me to invest in this podcast, and I don't know what to buy first. So we're going to talk about that right now. Okay, so first, do you need upfront capital to launch your podcast? Absolutely not. And that's what I love about podcasting, that so many people tend to think that it costs money, but it doesn't. You can literally start your podcast right now without spending a single dime. And here's how you do that. Okay, so let's do an assessment of what you have at your fingertips right now. Do you have a cell phone? I'm pretty sure you do. Do you have a laptop or a computer? If you have any one of those three, you can start a podcast right now and not have to spend any money. You've already invested in the cell phone. It's your daily function. It's things you use all the time to communicate, and or a computer. And both of these will give you the ability to record your voice and upload it as a podcast. Listen, at the very beginning, your podcast doesn't have to be super perfect. But I can tell you from experience that when I first launched my podcast, it was so exciting just to be able to pick up the cell phone and go, I'm going to record my podcast using my phone and upload it and let me just see if this is very easy and it doesn't, cause me to have to really work and overthink what I'm doing. And at the time, I really didn't know much about podcasting. So I was like, let me just dabble in this. But then after like a week or two of doing this, because I started doing them daily, I was so excited about doing the podcast. Now, when you go back and look at my first episodes, I published them every week. But yet I was recording daily podcasts. So I was preloading. And I was also practicing in case a few of those just didn't turn out too good. And this was with no editing. I just pulled out my phone and started talking. And I touched base on certain topics. I talked about things that were going on in my life. And I talked about the adventure of diving into podcasting. And I feel like that is a very good start. A lot of entrepreneurs, including myself, have started there. And the ones who have done that have had success in so many ways, especially when it comes to building a community. Because when you start off, if you don't have anything to talk about, just being transparent about you getting into podcasting and talking about maybe growing your business, or if it's a hobby, or if it's something you like to talk about and you want to learn more about it and you're learning in the podcast, like sharing what you've learned, that will build a lot of rapport with your listeners. And then eventually they want to really get more involved with you. And that's how you start to build that community on a podcast. But then you can also move that community into your other social media outlets or your business as you go. So as you grow your podcast and you start talking about these little things like, hey, you know what? I'm using my phone. I'm trying out with podcasting. I'm seeing what I can talk about on here. I'm seeing how my voice sounds, how I do as a host. Give me some feedback. And then that might turn into, hey, you know what? We've been doing this for, a couple months now. I've been having a lot of fun. And now you're starting to find exactly what you want to talk about. And you go, hey, you know what? I've invested a little bit more in my podcast, and I have this new mic that's coming in, and I can't wait to hear how I sound on this. And I can't wait for you guys to experience just a little bit more of a quality upgrade in this podcast. This is how much I appreciate you guys and my podcast. So boom, I'm going to do this. And then when the microphone shows up, you actually talk about it. And this gives you an opportunity then to, pull out a camera and actually do maybe an unboxing of the microphone and then rate it and review it online. And that could lead to the company that you bought the microphone from to reach out to you and say, hey, you know what? We want to send you another one to review, or we love this. We're going to share this on our social media outlet. And now your podcast is getting more traction and more exposure. And it really does just fuel what you're trying to do without spending any money at the very beginning. And even if you invest in a microphone, you're still not spending a lot of money. I mean, compared to what you would spend on marketing to really grow your business endeavors and to get that exposure, podcast cuts right through the clutter. So before we get into investing, I want to dial it back to just using what you have to podcast. You take your cell phone out and use the platform that I've linked in the description to really get your podcast launched on, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other great, incredible outlets without spending any money. It's really awesome. And it's very easy to upload it, whether you're using it on a phone or you're using it on a computer, wherever you get that file from once you're done recording. It's so simple to upload it. I mean, basically it's like this. If you can upload a YouTube video, you can upload a podcast. Super easy. And you have all these incredible options to attach to your podcast episode every time you upload it. The first year of my podcast, I never spent a single dime. Now, trust me, I have microphones because I do videography. I'm a commercial videographer. But those aren't microphones that I wanted to per se use for my podcast. I thought about it, but I said, if I want to get into podcasting, I want to eventually get a really good mic. But at the very beginning, I'm like, well, what microphone would I even get? So I just stuck with my cell phone. And when you go back and listen to those episodes, surprisingly, that raw form, I love it. I think it sounds great when someone starts their podcast and, they don't have it all together and maybe you're hearing background noises. Maybe they're at the park, maybe they're in their house and the kids are running around. Maybe they're in the shop. I don't know. It's just that rawness to me is just the grind. And I'd much rather hear someone grow in podcasting, hear that start to slowly fade away into more professional stuff because it leaves an anchor for me to know that this person started from scratch and they really did grow to the top. So that was exciting for me to have that same quality where it was rough, it was raw, but there's some things you can do to make your voice sound really good using a cell phone to record your podcast. The number one thing I'm going to tell you to do is to jump in your vehicle, not while you're driving, but to jump in your vehicle, shut the door, roll up the windows, and record your episode in there. Now, listen, it's going to get hot if you're in a hot environment. So, don't do anything stupid, okay? Make sure you take the precautions. You're getting in a vehicle, right? It's made to drive, made to go places, but don't leave yourself in there and have to get help, okay? But no, get in your car and use it as a recording booth because the car is already insulated very, very well. Your voice isn't going to bounce around too much in there. And if it does, it'll bounce off the windshield and the windshield's angled. So it's going to bounce, your vocals are going to bounce off the windshield, hit the dashboard and disperse into like the cushions of the seating and the material in the car. So, and the roof of a car is also insulated and has a sound barrier on the top. So this is exciting because you can literally use your car as the sound booth. And that's what I was doing for the longest time. Like I would pull up to the park because I'm going to take my walk. And before I take my walk, I would do an episode. Maybe it's a 5 or 10 minute episode. And then I'll go take my walk. Sometimes I get my ideas and come back to it and add to the episode. Or vice versa. I would just go to the park, walk, come back, jump in my car, boom, while I'm cooling down, do an episode. And because the juices are flowing, the energy's there, you're all excited, your creativity's there, your mind is clear. To me, that was the best possible way for me to start my podcast. And it sounded really, really well. So again, you got this cell phone. You can do this on the go. You can record it throughout the day. You can get in your car and get a good quality sound. You don't have to spend any money to launch your podcast. And you might be thinking, well, what am I going to talk about? Talk about what you're doing. If you don't have anything to talk about and you really want to try it, the opportunities will come. The ideas will come. The topics will come. You will find things to talk about, and there's no wrong way to do it. Even if you want to talk about what you were doing in your day, someone else is going to relate, and you build a community from that. And then later on, once you figure out what you want to accomplish with a podcast and talk about and what you want your podcast to be about, you can always rebrand or slowly shift that community that you've built into this new topic. And this new outlet is going to fuel everything else you do from that point on. But you have to get started. If you don't get started with podcasting, you're going to miss out on this. Every day there's an opportunity here to grow your podcast on social media, to build this community, to grow your business, to share something that other people will relate to talk about something that maybe will serve your community or serve others, or to talk about something to get it off of your chest, right? It could be a therapy for you. This is where podcasting to me is so exciting because there is no rule book to this. Yes, there's strategies and frameworks and ways to do it and equipment to get that makes you sound better and topics you can talk about. And obviously there's an algorithm you can feed. But at its core, podcasting gives me the most traction out of anything else I have. Even with my YouTube channel having the numbers it has and the subscribers I have and the wonderful community I have there on the commercial side, the video side of things, the podcast gives me the opportunity to talk about all the things that happen behind the scenes that are going to happen, or to talk about podcasting. And that's what I'm doing right now. I'm doing this series for season 3 to help people really launch into this, because the things I have planned for this podcast is going to grow so much. And I want to make sure that the audience is there and they're ready, so that when I make the next step, they can also make the step with me, and we're all on the same page. And now we've caught up to each other. See, right now, a lot of you haven't started your podcast. Some of you have, and you're still dabbling and learning. Some of you have started the podcast. It's going good. You got some traction. You're starting to build momentum. And then what? You're going to fall off. I'm going to make sure you don't fall off. I look at so many of these individuals that have podcasts. Some of them are entrepreneurs, some are content creators, some are just people that are teaching how-tos, and they flood everything into their podcast, which sounds great, and they're doing so good. And then you look at that and you go, oh, they haven't published a podcast in months, but yet they were doing it so good for so long, and then he just stopped. And I'm like, you had a good thing. What happened is, it's the same thing with a business owner. They get into something, start growing, then the business demands some attention, more attention in another area, and so they have to drop something. And the problem with that is people drop podcasting when that is not something you should drop, because it really doesn't take a lot to do it. There's other things. And even if you had to drop it, there's opportunities to bring other people in. Let's just say you have a functional business and you got some capital and you need to shift your gears and wear a different hat right now. Well, then have someone else do your podcast, or at least take your old episodes and start chopping them up. And let's just say you're solo, you can't afford that. You're really grinding, you're still growing the business, and you feel it needs more attention. Maybe you're just worn out. I get that. I've been there. You can still promote the episodes that you've already done with this small catalog by chopping it up. And I talk about it in the recent episodes. Go check it out. You can chop this stuff up, and you can still make social media content out of it, and it doesn't take any time at all. It's very simple. Minimal editing, if that. But even if you weren't making the micro content out of the old episodes, it's not hard just to take your phone out, record an episode, talk about the craziness in your work schedule, in your day, share something positive, or just talk about what it is that you want to start a conversation around. And then it doesn't have to be long. It could be a 2-minute, a 3-minute, 5-minute, it could be a 1 minute, it could be anything. It could be like, hey, what's up? I'm really busy this week. I love you guys. This is awesome. Make sure you comment below what you want me to talk about next week, because I'm burnt. Right? You could simply just do that. And you can get feedback from your community as you grow it. And we're going to talk about building the community too. Now, with that being said, please start your podcast. You never know what it might do for you, for your business, and how it'll make you feel and how much fun it is. And you're just really missing out. And this podcast thing is growing so rapidly. There is a lot of podcasters out there, but that doesn't mean it's watered down. You can really dial this in to fit anything that you're trying to push, promote, grow, establish, hit those goals, create the opportunity. It's all right there. So let's just say you have this podcast. You've been doing it for a while. Maybe you did it for a couple weeks and you're just like, I really want to do this. I want to dive right in head first. Let's go. What do I need, Zebulon? Here's what I recommend. If you're going to invest in your podcast, here's where you start. This is if you are still using a phone and you don't have a microphone. Even if you have, maybe you have a crappy microphone, right? When you're investing in your podcast, what should you do first? This is where you should start. It's a microphone, a mixer, a webcam, right off the bat. I'm going to repeat that. A microphone, a mixer, and a webcam. And let's extend a little bit, maybe even a key light. You might need a key light because if you're going to be doing video podcast, get some lighting in your face. But that's if you want to go that route. And what I mean by that route is if you want to dive into podcasting and video. See, podcasting is very good because people will listen to it, and they can listen to it while they're driving. They can listen to it while they're walking around cleaning the house, while they're on a walk. And so I say start with podcasting and don't worry about the video side of podcasts, because now you got to open up the YouTube outlet and you got to go there or wherever you're going to put your video. But you don't need to start with the video. So really, you just need a good microphone. But if you want to go all in, microphone, a good camera, and a key light. You got to see your face. And then you can start and you could dive right in. It's going to be amazing. And there's different levels of microphones and cameras. For the microphones, I have a PDF that you can get absolutely free if you join my podcast community mastermind group by heading over to thepodcastintherough.com/learn. And you can download this. Plus, we can have a conversation inside that community on how to get started with these microphones. So the microphone setup's not too bad. And then the mixer doesn't have to be crazy either. When I started looking at mixers, I was really confused. I was like, well, I know I want this and this and this, but do I need all the bells and whistles? And you really don't. There's only a few things that you really need. And we won't go too heavy into that, but I can tell you this. You can get a microphone and a mixer very affordable. And I don't think there's any wrong way to go about a mixer, but I have some recommendations inside that PDF in the Facebook group that you can get access to, and it's simple. And you can go all the way up. You can really invest in mixers. There's some really nice ones. I'm currently recording this episode on the Rodecaster Pro, and it just works for me. But I really love my smaller mixer that I got that was really cheap to me. I thought it was very affordable, and it packs a punch, and it's mobile. I could take it on the go, super easy. So that would be like the best version of the cell phone, because I can then have a mic and this mixer, get in my car, go to the park, take a walk, record an episode. Amazing. And if you get the right microphone, which you don't have to spend a lot there to get a really good one. Again, the recommendations are inside the PDF. This microphone, you don't have to get a pop filter, and that's so you can, really eliminate the plosives. Sometimes you hear that now. I even have an extended filter on this microphone, and it's got a lot of plugins that help this microphone handle my plosives, but sometimes it still comes through. We'll get into that. You're probably like, what are you talking about? Plosives and all this stuff? Yes, it's okay. So a microphone, a mixer, and for the camera, go with a webcam. Get a decent webcam, something around, $50 to $100. There's some really good ones out there, because then that's something you can plug right in your computer if you're going to do the video podcast, and it just works. It just works. You want something that doesn't give you a headache. It just works. Trust me, I'm a video guy. I have all the really good, expensive cameras, and if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to get into a mess. But if you do know what you're doing, your quality is going to look amazing. But then you're going to have a slew of other technical problems that just don't line up, and you're just trying to do something simple like a podcast. So don't overdo it. Don't overcomplicate it. But when you're investing, a microphone, a mixer, a webcam, and maybe a key light for your face, that's where I'd start. Second to that, you got this podcast going, you got your microphone, maybe you're doing video podcasting, everything's looking good, sounding good. The next stage of investing into something would be, hey, you got some traction on your podcast platforms. Why not dedicate a domain to this? So secure your domain. Secure your podcast domain and get a website. And this website is for podcasting. Don't just get any website, because you want something that's really integrated and automated and easy to use. And if you don't know coding, or you can't find a good, website template, you might get yourself into some trouble, and it might be overbearing, stressful, and just too much for you to handle. Again, you want podcasting to fit into your daily grind and not be a burden, not be a problem, not be something that, I got to get onto this podcast. You need to be like, I can't wait to get back to the house or wherever I'm at and record this podcast, or jump in my car and take a walk and record this episode and share with my community. Amazing, super easy. You should look forward to it. I have fun doing this. It's awesome. And trust me, I do a lot of editing on my podcast, from the audio to the EQ to the mixing, the mastering, and then to the visuals. I like to animate. I have some cool things going on. I'm just really giving you an experience and giving some entertainment, and it's just a lot of fun for me. A lot of work, but a lot of fun. But I have the time. I can do that. And trust me, I am running multiple businesses, so don't think that it's like, they just sit around and do a podcast all day. No, I got 50 million things going on, right? But I still find time to do this, and I make sure that I get it done. And if I think that I'm not going to be able to accomplish that goal that week, then I simplify it. We're not going to go over the top on this. We just can't. We don't have time for that. But we're still going to pack in a really good quality episode with the right things. So that's what you can do. Now, you got this podcast. You've secured the domain name. Where do you go for the website? Well, I have a link that I'm going to share under the description of this episode. And to me, it's affordable. It is a monthly thing. You could try it for free at first, but it's so simple to plug in. And I've talked about this on several other episodes, so I won't go into detail here. But if you get this, then when you upload your podcast to the platform, it just goes and automates itself everywhere else. Very simple setup as well, just to get started. But once it's done, you don't have to worry about it anymore. You just do it and you go. And it makes your podcast just look more appealing. And I find, here's why the benefit of the website to me is really good. Not only does it host all of the episodes that you can go and browse very easily, but the biggest thing I found is, for the longest time, I'm an Apple guy. So I have Apple Podcast, but a lot of people, a lot of my viewers and listeners, they don't. So, if you're not watching this on YouTube and you're just listening to it, how are you getting to this podcast? And so some are on Spotify, some are on some other outlets, and some are on Apple Podcasts. So when I would share it on Facebook or my social media, I would always share the Apple Podcast. And a lot of people just weren't able to listen to it. They just didn't have that. So when I started the dedicated podcast website, what was nice is it was all there, and they have this integrations that are automatically plugged in that link it. You don't have to link all this stuff, and it has all the different outlets. So when you share this, your listeners can go to your podcast website and they go, I listen to it on Spotify. They click the Spotify and go right to Spotify. They click the Apple Podcast, they go right to Apple Podcasts. They click the other outlets, they go right there. It's super easy. And if they don't have anyone, if they're not subscribed to any one of those outlets for the podcast, they can simply listen to it right there on your website. So they just click it, listen to it, download it, write a review about it, comment on it. Boom. Instant opportunity for growing a community. It's super easy. So definitely invest in a domain and a website and get that set up. Super easy. And listen, do it yourself. Trust me, just do it yourself. You can hire people to do your logo. You can hire people to do your website. Right now at the very beginning, just do it yourself. Now listen, if you're a business owner and you got a lot of stuff going on, then yes, hire someone to do it. Definitely pay someone to get it done, right? Or make a deal with them, right? But get someone to do it. The reason I say do it yourself, because when you set up your podcast yourself and you do your logo and you set up this website, you take pride in what you're doing. Now the podcast just isn't like a social media outlet where you're like, I'm going to throw it up there and you're not really connected to it. But when you build your podcast, you put in the work. Now it's like a little nest egg here. It's a little baby, right? You're trying to grow this thing. It's exciting. And you're like, oh, I'm going to nurture this. It's going to grow. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be fun. Where will it go? What's it going to teach me in life? Might as well do it and be more independent if you can. So what else do you invest in to improve the quality of your podcast at that point? Well, the only other thing I would say to invest in would be some really good sound padding for whatever room you're in. If you're not using the car anymore and you got this room, go get some sound foam and put that up around the room you're in to really take out some of that room reverb and that audio bounce. And once you do that, now you're solid. Even if you have a microphone that's really good and eliminates a lot of that for you, go ahead and upgrade wherever you're at with some sound foam and just put it in places and play around with that. Again, this is part of the experience. You could talk about this. We just added this to the podcast room. Check it out on the YouTube channel. Or maybe they're just listening to your podcast. So explain to them, hey, listen, I got this cool sound foam. It's got all these like lines and patterns and I stuck it up on the ceiling in here. And how do I sound, right? It's not bouncing around enough. Do you hear the difference? It's awesome. You could even do a before and after. Something else to talk about. So what else do you invest in? Nothing. That's it. That's all you have to do. Trust me. I have all the mixers. I have the microphones. It's incredible. I love it. But you know what's funny? After investing in all this equipment, I still use my cheaper microphones. I still enjoy using my cell phone at times to record episodes or, my Power Talks, which I definitely want to plug that right now. If you want to go deeper with content and go outside of the podcast a little bit more, and you want to show your support for this podcast, please take a moment and check out the buymeacoffee.com/intherough. And you could buy me a coffee. You can contribute to the podcast. You can support it. But you also get content, exclusive content. And I have all these power talks when I'm in, after a good meeting or a meeting with someone, or I'm at the park and I'm getting inspired. I share some really inspiring, motivational, uplifting, and crazy ideas in my power talks that you don't want to miss. It'll really help you if you're trying to grow as an entrepreneur or grow your business or really just find peace in your life. There's so many things that I talk about in these power talks that will really get you to think outside the box. So be sure to check that out. Once again, that's buymeacoffee.com/intherough. And there's plenty of opportunities for you to get involved. Okay, so how much time do I need to dedicate to this? You can dedicate some time to this, but it's not like exhausting, okay? It's a learning experience. It's really exciting. So, for me, when I got the Rodecaster, it was kind of intimidating. And I was like, okay, well, I know there's a lot of settings in here and, what I know and what I need to know for making my audio sound really good and leveled. I just really want it to be leveled. And so I started dialing into the Rodecaster and making adjustments and making my microphone sound awesome. But what's nice is it really is plug and play. You can really plug in the microphone, set the audio level, hit record and go. And so again, don't overcomplicate your podcast. Don't overcomplicate your investment into your podcast. And definitely don't overcomplicate what your episodes are about. You want to make this very easy, very fun, and streamline it and just go for it. Now, last but not least, how to build a community with your podcast, one that really grows your business as well. Okay, so let's talk about that. When you're doing a podcast, you have the opportunity to talk about different topics, your brands, your services, your products, your experience with something. And because of that, you have this conversation that you start and everyone gets involved in that. And the communication is key because you can really learn about your prospects. They can learn about you. And all of this starts with just talking about something and then opening the door and reminding them to comment below. So I encourage you right now, comment below wherever you're listening to this, and let's get into a conversation about today's episode, about your podcast that you're going to launch. So in your case, if you have a business, talk about what's going on at the business. Talk about the ups and downs, the ins and outs. Talk about maybe the cool distributors that you're connected with, or the new products that are coming, or something you want to expand or grow, or how you want to give back, or what you feel about the community and what it needs. And talk about everything you can about your business or the subject or the topic or whatever it is that you're doing with your podcast. The experience, the journey, right? Take them along, because these are the individuals that are listening to you, and they want to get more involved the more they listen. And because of that, now you start to build a community. And the community is where you start the conversation. And when you have this conversation, now you have this small community on your podcast. But as that grows, there's going to be a time where you say, hey, you know what? I just opened up this new account. Maybe it's an Instagram, maybe it's a Facebook, maybe it is your YouTube channel. Please go over there and subscribe and check us out there. We're going to go deeper into the podcast. Give them a reason why. Like, why would I need to go an extra step? But what's nice is a lot of the listeners are probably on one of these platforms. So it just makes it easier for them to get more involved with you by just subscribing to you on Instagram or communicating with you on YouTube and subscribing to the channel. It makes it easier. So then they're going to jump over from this platform to the platform that they're already there, or they're going to create an account on this platform and they're going to get more involved. A lot of people make the mistake of getting a podcast and they throw it everywhere, but then it's watered down and you're not giving one of these outlets attention and it doesn't look right. You really have to look at where is your target audience. And maybe you don't have that developed just yet, but you're going to develop it. So ideally, what would your target audience look like? What does your customer avatar look like? And once you get that figured out, now you know, hey, majority of them are going to be on TikTok or on Instagram or on Facebook or on YouTube. YouTube, you can't go wrong. I always say start with YouTube. Start with YouTube to build a community. Secondary, you can build a really great community on Facebook, depending on where your target market is. But YouTube, your target market is definitely going to be there. Definitely going to be there. And how do you do that? You build that community by creating a conversation in the comments, in your community tab, sharing the videos, creating playlists, doing videos specifically to solve a problem. So you can look that up on YouTube and find out what people are looking for. So right now, I'm talking about how to podcast. So my prospects and my community is a bunch of individuals like you that are on the fence with podcasting. They don't know where to start, or they have a podcast and they're an entrepreneur and they have this business and things are going and they need that next level. Or surprisingly, I have a lot of followers that are working for big entrepreneurs and they're in charge of their podcast for that entrepreneur, but they need to get more insight and information to rapidly grow that podcast. So they're grabbing information from a lot of different sources, and I'm one of them. So they go, oh, Zebulon talked about this. Bam, we're going to plug that in. And why is that? Well, I made some traction a few years ago when I started growing Entrepreneurs Podcast, and I had a lot of success with that. So over the years, having the great success with other podcasts and integrating all the strategies and being able to really just bring a full circle for the production value of a podcast, whether it's audio, visuals, graphics, and marketing, it all came together very well. But it's also very rewarding to see that the tools that I'm sharing here on my podcast are really making a difference in these entrepreneurs and businesses podcasts, and they're growing. And I still have a part of that because of what I'm sharing, and it's trickling into their team, and their team is applying that. So that's rewarding and very exciting. So I'm very happy about that. But most of my community is individuals that are also stay-at-home mom or dads that are like, hey, I want to kind of create a side outlet for maybe possibly a source of income, or to grow a side business, or to, talk more about this hobby that I enjoy, or a good book, right? And they start these podcasts and they do very, very well. Again, I'm encouraging you, whether you're just, someone that wants to get into podcasting, you don't have a real goal, it's not defined yet, you kind of just want to try this out, well, stick to it. At least do it for a couple months. And if you're a business owner and you're really busy and you got all the hats and you're like, I don't know if I could do it, trust me, you need a podcast. If you're not podcasting right now, you are missing out. Definitely start a podcast, even if it's 5 minutes a day, 5 minutes a week. Do an episode once a week at least, and just share your journey. Talk about it. You're going to be flooded with opportunities in a short amount of time. It's going to be the best investment of your time And if you do decide to invest money into this podcast and go beyond just your cell phone, it's going to be the best investment in your business right now for 2023. One of the things you can do if you're a business owner and you have your podcast set up, I want to spark some ideas for you. You can invite your customers to be a guest on your podcast to talk about your products and services, and that will give you some really great social proof. But it will also bring you closer to your customers, give them an opportunity to talk about something that they enjoy and why they use this service. Or you can also bring them on to talk about the community. You can also use your podcast to speak to the people that supply the products that you sell within your business, if you have that kind of business. Or you can use it to talk to other entrepreneurs that are like your business and bounce ideas and put on a really great show and entertain and create an experience for your listeners and your community. And all of that floods back into your business. And here's another thing at its core. If you have a business and you're like, I'm not trying to tackle the world, maybe you're thinking this is too big for you, think local. How can your podcast really affect the local community? And you can do this by saying, hey, this podcast puts me in a position to speak to my fellow business owners or my community more. And you can go out there and start to offer a service where people are featured on your podcast and get a shout out. Or you can use it as a tool to raise money for your charitable events in your community, or to talk about things that isn't getting done around your community and how you can make it better, or to talk about how wonderful your community is. And that alone just brings awareness to your business and to who you are as a person. And so that is going to grow that community because people are now going to trust you more. They're going to see who you really are. And they're going to be like, hey, I want to support this person and their business. And maybe you're a family business, so they want to support this family-owned business. And so you don't have to think that you're tackling the world when you do podcasting. It can literally be and stay local in your community. And it's a beautiful thing. So pick up the ball and get podcasting. And if you want more, and you need help with that, definitely get inside my podcast community mastermind group on Facebook. Jump in there. We have a nice little community we're growing. I started this a few months ago. And if you want to get involved, it's absolutely free. All you have to do is go to thepodcastintherough.com/learn and jump in. It's absolutely free. If you get access to my PDFs, and if you have any questions, I'll build something custom around that, and we can all talk about it in the community. And there's a lot of great people in there too that have started their podcast that you can bounce ideas off of. And if you want to go a little bit further, like I said, you want to support this podcast and you want to see how I'm doing some stuff around, behind the scenes and stuff, get that extra content, that premium content by going to buymeacoffee.com/intherough and support this podcast. Buy me a coffee. I love coffee. Get access to the Power Talks, the premium content, and a slew of other things that I'm bringing to that platform as well. When you start your podcast, the one thing I want you to think about is not the money. How much money can I make with a podcast? I want you to think about how much reach can I have with a podcast? How many opportunities can I create for myself using this podcast? How many people can I meet or get in proximity to learn something new or to grow my business with a podcast? At the very beginning, it might work for you, but it's not going to be a direct, hey, here's my podcast, I get money from that. You can, and I challenge you to accomplish that, but that can't be your only goal. This is going to be a great tool that fits into the middle of everything you're doing that really gives you that opportunity to build a solid brand, to build a solid community, and have social proof. Tune in next week for another great episode of the Podcast in the Rough. Podcast in the Rough.